Perfect. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm Hayley, the volunteer coordinator at the CIPR. I know lots of you, but some of you are new faces to me. It's nice to see you. I just want to thank everyone for joining us today for this professional development session on equity, diversity and inclusion. Today we are joined by group chairs, vice chairs and EDI champions for the groups and networks. Today's session will be led by Harish Bayani, who is the Senior Partner at PRM Diversity Consultants. Harish has been working closely with the CIPR to develop our EDI strategy and has kindly agreed to speak with us about this today and to lead the Q&A session for us all. Samantha, who everybody will know, hopefully, Sirusurin, is the Managing Director at Perpetual Motion and Chair of the CIPR's International Group. Samantha is also the Group Chair's representative on the Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Governance Committee, and she'll facilitate the Q&A session for us. First up, though, we're going to go to Claire Bloomer, who is Director of Operations at CIPR. So Claire's going to provide a summary of the work that we've been undertaking around EDI up to this point, and then we'll go over to Harish and Samantha. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you. Thanks, Hayley. Nice to see you all today. And thanks for sharing your lunch break with us as well. And appreciate you taking the time out of your day for this session. So I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of the work that the CIPR has done so far, so that you, for some of you who might be new to these sessions, sort of take you on our journey where we've come from and where we're going to. We decided in 2022 to undertake the National Equality Standard, which is a diversity and inclusion accreditation organised by EY. And the EY standard looks at a number of different areas across the business. It covers 7 different pillars from sort of your business, your people, your leadership, your measurement and review. 7 different pillars looking across the organisation, and there are 35 competencies sort of underneath those 7 pillars. So it's looking at everything that we do. It's all encompassing. And when we agreed to undertake the National Equality Standard, we also are one of the first, or are the first organisations to have our volunteers included within the assessment. Normally it's looking at staff members and the internal runnings and how you manage to sort of work with your stakeholders. But as a volunteer organisation, we decided that we would invite volunteers to be part of those focus groups and be assessed from that side of things as well. So it's a very thorough process. We submitted all of our evidence, and in 2022, unfortunately, we didn't pass the assessment, but we expected that would be the case. We went into the NES assessment to provide us almost with a sort of a roadmap to identify where we needed to do work in diversity and inclusion to help us understand sort of our starting point. Where were we at that point in time, and where did we think the priorities were, and where should we be heading? So the recommendations that came from the assessment in I think it was September 2022 were very, very detailed and gave us that roadmap that we were looking for. Many recommendations come from that, and we've been able to put a lot of that work into place over the last year. So given the recommendations, we started working with Harish, who's going to be managing the Q&A for us in a minute, and sort of a number of the recommendations that NES made, we've begun to put in place. So we've set up a governance standing committee so that diversity and inclusion sits right at the heart of the decision-making process at the CIPR and has that oversight from leadership. And from that have come a number of different elements as well, sort of working with group chairs, asking you as groups to have EDI champions as part of your committee arrangement and your working activities. We launched our strategy in August this year, and there's a lot of work and consultation that went into getting that strategy together. And I hope if you've had a chance to look at it, you agree that it sort of gives us a really good direction and a way to measure our success and progress as we sort of develop our work on diversity and inclusion. So I think I'm not going to say too much more with that, because that hopefully gives a little bit of background as to where we are. I focused a lot on the NES because for us, the NES was sort of, even though there'd been so much work that had gone on in the past by the Diversity and Inclusion Network and other groups of people as well on diversity, equity and inclusion, for us, the NES gave us a sort of a framework to help us understand where we needed to focus and where we needed to go next. So although the focus for me has been on the NES, we very much recognise that actually it's a much bigger and a much longer journey than that, but hopefully that sort of helps you understand why we took that stage to go through that accreditation process. We have just submitted evidence for our reassessment, probably important to mention that, and we hope to find out later this month whether we've been successful in achieving that. So we'll keep you updated on that as we go forward. So thank you. Thanks, Hayley. I think I'll probably hand over to Samantha and Harish now.
Well, thank you very much, Sinclair and Hayley, for the introductions. So, Harish, I'll hand over to you then. I mean, what I would just say to everyone listening today, I mean, obviously the EDI is an area where some people have made lots of progress in their committees, and it also depends on what your committee actually looks like. I mean, so there are some which may think they haven't made much progress at all, and that the committee is not diverse. But I mean, clearly the purpose of this session is for us to have the most open discussion possible about any concerns, anything that anything that slightly troubles you. In terms of the actual question and answer, I mean, for those of you that are happy to speak openly here, then that's perfectly fine, and we'll be happy to hear your comments. For anyone that's like in the car or has got a question which you feel is like slightly uncomfortable, then what you can do is just put the message in the chat and say you just want it to be asked, anonymously. You can send that just to me if you like. So anyway, hopefully by the time we get to the end of this session, we'll have had a good discussion. So I'll hand over then to Harish for your own comments.
Thanks, Samantha. Hello, everybody. I'm very mindful that you're investing your lunch hour in this probably, so I'll try and help you make the most of it. Very briefly, I run a diversity consultancy. I've been doing that for about 22 years now. Prior to that, I was in corporate life, like many of yourselves, for about 20 years. And I'd just like to say I've been delighted to be working with Claire, Maha, and the team on the work here on EDI. And the reason I say that is because it's been a very sincere, dedicated approach to wanting to do this properly and right, and with the recognition that requires tremendous investment, actually, as you've begun to see yourselves. So that said, this session is about you and your concerns and needs and wants and ideas. So I'd like to open it up to any questions you may have, and see how we go. This is a conversation around it's a conversation around you and your needs, because I'm very mindful it's very early in the process for you, and you've probably got all sorts of things you're thinking about. So does anyone have a question to start us off, or a comment? Let me ask a question then. How do you feel so far about what you've heard about the CIPR's approach on EDI and its expectations of you, if I can put it like that?
In fact, Harish, I can see we've already got John with his hands up. So John, we'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Samantha. Sorry, John.
That's quite all right. So I've just come back into the chair after a sabbatical this year. So this piece of work is not something I've had my hands into much. Although I was part of, when I was on board last, on the CIPR board last, I was involved in the diversity EDI piece. I guess it's more of a statement of intent, really. So I come at it from a point of view as having been raised in Southeast London amongst a very diverse community. And my approach was always about just being colourblind, treating everyone the same. And my community, my friends, I didn't see that. And for me, Black Lives Matter was a bit of an eye-opener. And the reason I worked with Advita and with the guys on the EDI panel was I felt that I was our target audience. I was a 54-year-old white middle-class male, heterosexual, just to add it all in there, who wanted to be better informed, who wanted to be educated, who wanted to make a difference and wanted to be better at understanding the challenges and not just, I guess, really understand the difference between equity and equality, for example. And so that's where I'm at with the journey. You know, I'm delighted that one of our committee comes from an agency which has absolutely nailed its colours to the mast in Sherry at Folk. And she's on our committee in Wales, and she's on the EDI group. So, you know, I'm absolutely committed to making our panel, our committee more diverse, really recognising that we need to do a great deal of work on that. We're a very effective committee, but we are by no means diverse. We probably, our diversity stops at, we probably hit the 60-40, 70-30 gender split of our profession, and that's probably where it ends. I don't think we haven't looked at the traits, we haven't looked at that. So we are at the moment going out to find a whole cohort of new members. We lost a lot of our committee. They all came to the end of their term, and we actually lost a lot of our officers at the start of this year. And because of the success of some of the people we've had, they've moved on. So we've got a big hole in our committee. And so now is the opportunity for us to really recruit well, recruit to make a difference. So I'm going to shut up now, but I'm just going to say I'm excited to be part of this again. And thank you very much for coming to talk to us today. I have my notepad and I have my pen and I have a cup of coffee, and I'm looking forward to what you have to tell us.
Okay, great. Thank you, John. In fact, I can just pick up on one thing you mentioned. You said you were in Southeast London, very diverse community. And one thought that may be in some of your heads, especially if you're relative newbies to this, you may be thinking, well, I don't have diversity in my region, if you cover a particular region. And the idea of this is not to have diversity for diversity's sake, or any particular mix of diversity that you may think is standard. The idea is really to start thinking about what diversity means for your group, how it needs to be diverse in itself. And that might be very different to how a group based out of South London might look. So it's not just about culture or races, it's also about different ways of thinking, for example. So it's about leveraging the types of diversity that you can get into your groups to enhance the performance of the group, because the innovation and creativity for groups and organizations and teams comes from diversity and not from uniformity. But also then the other bit of that is the inclusion bit, is about making sure that these roles that you have on your groups, for example, are accessible to everyone and not just limited to a few because you happen to recruit through specific networks or things like that. Okay, just to make one point that I thought might be pertinent. But other thoughts? I see a few more people have joined us. Welcome. We're just having an open session. This is your conversation. What are your thoughts? What are your needs? What are your concerns? What do you like? How can we help?
Sally's got her hand up here. Sally, please go ahead.
Hi, Sally.
Hello everyone. I chair the Northwest group, and we're very large as a committee, and we're really proud of the fact that we have got increased our diversity. We were actually at one point very gender specific, which was unintentional, but we've made ways to try and change that. We've got an EDI champion who's really passionate about it, and she really enthuses us about it as well. So that's really helpful. She's also got her own lived experiences, as some of us have as well, including myself. My question to you was, one of the things I'm aware of, and it's interesting with what John was just referring to about where he came from his own background, is that we are visually, if you were to look at us, we are quite representative to a degree, but then there are other ways in which we're not. So for me, it's trying to sort of border on that sense of how can we demonstrate the diversity of our region if we can't reflect that on our committee, or are there ways in which we can sensitively identify individuals, or, you know, put it out there really that we are looking to increase our diversity within our committee so that we do have those perspectives and those voices?
I'm not sure I've understood your question, so let me try and phrase it to see if I have. How can you go about promoting the fact that you want more diversity on your group? Is that broadly it?
In part, yes, but it's more to do with us being able to understand and serve our community within the region. So, for example, we have visually, as I say, that's, you know, in some ways that's that most typical way of us seeing diversity, isn't it? But I'm quite aware that, you know, some of the areas of diversity are not something that people may wish to highlight because it's their choice, and why should they?
Yeah.
But equally, you know, we won't know unless we ask, and, you know, that because I always remember, as an example, when I joined the Northwest Committee, visually I look like someone who might be from the Mediterranean, Europe, or something like that. I'm very aware that people often assume that, but actually I am actually classed as someone with mixed ethnicity, because my husband, I'm gonna get more my mixes here, my father is from North Africa. So as part of that, I've always been seen, you know, that's always something I've known, but I appreciate people wouldn't know that to look at me. So when we were talking about it as a committee, people were like, oh, we really need to raise the levels of our diversity. We've not got anybody from that. And I just had to put my hand up and say, look, I appreciate why you might not have known this. Nobody asked. Why would you ask? You know, that kind of thing. So it has made me realise that when it comes to things with regards to disability, their sort of sexuality, a variety of different things that are not visible. And then obviously in some cases from a disability perspective, we don't have that. I suppose I'm asking that sensitive question about how can we remain sensitive and sensible, but at the same time, we want to really truly reflect our community and our region that we serve.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Sorry, it took me a while to get my to understand. I come across this all of the time, and it's because these are sensitive subjects. So, you know, when you ask people about, you know, how they are diverse, you're potentially asking them things that their own families or partners may not know about. Okay, so it's bound to be sensitive sometimes, and part of the key to it is to demonstrate your sincerity and your commitment, that you're doing this for all the right reasons. It's not because you've got some idle curiosity, but you genuinely want to do what you've just said, which is to embrace diversity and inclusion and ensure that you're not inadvertently leaving people out. So you have to find ways to express that and demonstrate that. And that's partly what I like about the CIPR approach, is the amount of effort they are putting into all of that as we go. So it's about generating that sincerity, creating that recognition that these can be sensitive issues, making sure that your processes allow for confidentiality in the right places, anonymity in the right places, and critically trust. If I boil it down to one word, it's trust. Yeah, if you generate that trust, you'll get the data.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you, Harry, and thank you, Sally, for the question. Ruth has got her hands up. Please go ahead, Ruth.
Hi, Ruth.
Hi, thanks very much. I got a bit of a sort of story to share, which touches more on the accessibility side of things. And I guess attached to it is a question perhaps more for my CIPR colleagues at HQ. So at our, sorry, clarify, those that don't know, so I currently chair the East Anglia Committee, and we ran our regional conference in person this year at a venue, and we took care beforehand to check with the venue that the venue could be accessible, and we were assured it would be on all fronts. What actually happened was, in practice, we had a delegate on the day who had some very real accessibility needs. David is blind and also can't hear very well. And it transpired that the venue sort of wasn't actually quite able, they weren't as accessible as they thought they would be. So it was one of those sort of slightly unfortunate things. David was wonderful, very helpful and understanding on the day, as was indeed everyone in the room. And we managed in true CIPR spirit. And even more happily, David's now putting himself forward. We've got our AGM tonight. He's one of the nominees, hopefully going to be voted onto the committee for the next year. So, which is wonderful. He's relatively new in the profession. He's got a lot of energy and enthusiasm. We're looking forward to welcoming him on board. And of course, as it happens, with his particular profile, he'll also be helping us, particularly in this area. But I suppose it just raised for us as a committee some very real sort of practical challenges. We're sort of so committed, first of all, to this diversity piece, and I second the question before, like that's quite challenging, but we're, in terms of unpacking what that actually means and how you actually do it, but we're kind of going forwards in absolute commitment. But I guess this particular, and that's on the diversity front, but I guess on the accessibility front, going back to that example I shared, it's just raised for us sort of very real practical questions. So, for example, as well, I know one of my colleagues, I think Jo's on the call, she's co-leading our EDI for the committee. I think she spent best part of the day before the conference valiantly going through the deck and trying her best to make sure it was as accessible as possible. And then we had the problems on the day. And so I suppose what it raised was, if we're really going to be committed to this as a body, I guess I'm wondering what kind of resources might be available at HQ level to facilitate that, because obviously we're all volunteers, and committed as we might be, it's already, like, for example, when you put on any kind of event, let alone a regional conference, it's a huge amount of work. And then there's a whole extra layer that's coming in with all of this that we're really committed to, but just already at maximum stretch. So yeah, I guess I'm just asking practically for your thoughts on that, but also, yes, to hear from HQ colleagues as to how they might practically be thinking about stepping forward to help groups in this way. Thank you. Sorry, I've gone on a bit there.
I've got one or two reflections on that, but I think maybe we could start with one or two of our CIPR colleagues to respond to that first, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Ruth. Thank you. Yeah, I think the first thing I would say from what you shared is that it sounds like you did everything that you could do to assist the individual at the event and afterwards. And I think it's credit to you that you've been able to, this person is joining the committee and is taking part, because I think one of the things I've learned from working with Harish is that we're always learning, and we will make mistakes, and we don't have all of the answers to these things. And I think that's something that I'm very much aware of. And previously I might have tried to answer your question and give you a solution. But to be honest, I think we're all learning together. And I think it's through having these forums and having the EDI champions that we can share these experiences that we're having, and then hopefully be able to build a platform of information, advice, resources, whatever that might be. We have talked about whether there's potential funding to assist with accessibility, whether that is in the form of technology that might help, or it could be in terms of consultancy for this sort of thing. So that is the type of thing that we've talked about, but as yet there's nothing sort of formal in place. But I think we're just open really to having those conversations with you and others in your position. Whenever you're having these experiences, then do come and talk to us, and we'll try and help us. So I know that's not giving an answer, but it's hopefully sharing with you that we're there with you, and we're trying to do as much as we can really to help.
Yeah, thanks so much, Claire. That's really appreciated. And that's why it's great to have an opportunity like today, just to, for everyone to share these kind of experiences as we step forwards in commitment to progressing things in the right direction. I guess the reality is, as you commit and you engage, it's almost inevitably going to come up against some of these practical challenges, and it's that's why it's really, I really appreciate us being able to meet today and share in this way and just see how we might move forwards to make it work.
Just to add, Ruth and others, there's a couple of comments coming through in the chat, which hopefully you'll find useful from Cornelius and Avril from the DIN committee's work. And I'd add what Claire was talking about there and emphasize that, to say, nobody should expect you to have all the answers, because the reality is no one has all the answers. I don't have all the answers, nobody else has all the answers. And these things are often very specific, very contextual on the day. And so you have to try and do whatever you can in the circumstances to plan beforehand, and then on the day in execution, maybe thereafter. So sometimes, well, usually the best philosophy is not to try to pretend you know all the answers, but to actually admit that you don't, and that you're on a journey and you're on a learning curve like everyone else is on EDI, and to invite people, your stakeholders, to come and work with you, to help educate you, to help you understand what the needs are, so that you're engaging with them from the outset, and that in itself will help those stakeholders to understand how difficult a task this can be in practice. I just wanted to just thought it would be worth adding that. I see Rachel's hand up. Shall we go to Rachel?
Yes.
By the way, yeah, this is a conversation not just with questions for me to answer, but whoever you think can be useful to you out of this session, please do direct towards them, or bring yourselves in if you have a comment or a solution. Sorry, Rachel, on you go.
No, that's okay. Thank you. I'm really excited to be part of this committee and to learn myself on these issues. I think my own lived experience means I'm quite passionate about what I can personally bring around things like female leadership, development of women leaders, and the loss of women leaders in the workplace once they have children, neurodiversity, hidden challenges, and kind of social mobility as a whole, getting people into the profession and advancing within the profession. And when I read the EDI strategy, I felt a bit like, would it be helpful to have a definition or some further exploration of what diversity and inclusion means, so that it's more explicit? Because then when I went to do my strengths and weaknesses, which I'm just starting to do because I was a bit late to the committee, I realised that they were asking us to just do on the surface level, what are we seeing around strengths, weaknesses and the diversity of our group. But actually we would need to do a questionnaire about neurodiversity in order to understand how neurodiverse our committee is. So it felt very much kind of like quite a visual representation of diversity. And I wondered if maybe there was a little bit of unpicking there that could be done just to be a bit more explicit within the strategy and with how we learn about what inclusion really means in the broadest sense. Does that make sense?
I think so, if I've understood correctly. You've touched on one of the biggest challenges in the subject, I think, is, how broad is it when we talk about diversity? And it's as broad as your imagination in reality. And then you start thinking about, well, how do we cover all aspects of diversity? And the answer is, in practice, you can't. And so inevitably, because every organization, every individual has finite resources, you end up having to prioritize while taking all your stakeholders with you. And I mean all your stakeholders. For example, there's a conversation going on at the moment in every organization about which areas of diversity they should be focusing on. And that might vary by department, by region, by group, or whatever else. And I touched on it earlier, you should actually tailor this to your own dynamics in your own groups. So you mentioned neurodiversity. That may well be a right area of focus for your group, but not necessarily for other groups for all sorts of reasons. Part of the key is taking all your stakeholders with you. So that's by first of all understanding that you need to be guided as objectively as possible in your selections of which types of diversity you focus on. And the best way I've seen of doing that is to use data, often quantitative data, but also qualitative data, because that data should guide you in terms of indicating where the biggest issues are, where the most serious challenges are, the biggest opportunities are, that sort of thing. And that should help you to prioritize. And if you use data, then that will also help you to take all your stakeholders with you, because you can use that data and that analysis that you've used to help explain to them why their particular stakeholder group may be an area of focus or indeed not, if that makes sense. So I know that doesn't fully answer the question you have. I think it's a bit difficult. Actually, I would look on you, because you've chosen, for example, neurodiversity as an area of focus. I would look on you to start your thought process about that. And I'm sure there can be help and support from the centre to a certain degree, but the chances are you'll probably know as much about the needs in that area as the centre does currently, without wishing to dismiss anything that the centre might.
Yeah, I think it's just about having that framework that, you know, my first instinct was I would probably want to do a survey to find out what diversity we don't know about, what we can't see, what hasn't been defined, a bit like Sally said, really, in terms of her personal experience, what couldn't be seen. But I'm not an expert in, I think then what comes is like a fear of using the wrong language.
Yeah.
So you've got the intention, but you haven't got the tools and the kind of central framework to say, okay,
yeah,
this is maybe a questionnaire we should roll out across committees to make sure that we understand.
And the difficulty becomes that the language isn't always constant. The language also changes. Yeah, what's acceptable language one day isn't necessarily the next, and sometimes it will flip back to what it was originally as well. So we live in this very the challenge we've got with EDI is that we live in a much more complex environment that we have to navigate nowadays. It's a much fairer environment for all, where everyone has certain rights that they can assume, which they didn't have, you know, a few decades ago, certainly. So we come from that era where life wasn't that fair, actually, but it was much simpler to navigate for everyone. You knew where you stood, whoever you were. Whereas now we have a much more inclusive society, not completely, but much more. But as a result, as a consequence, almost, it's become far more difficult to navigate. And so the best thing you can do about that, again, I come back to, is to acknowledge that you don't have all the answers. You don't necessarily understand all the language, and that's why you need support and help and input from your stakeholders, rather than being in a position to provide all the answers with a survey here or there.
I think, Arish, I was just pointing out that there's going to be a few comments on the resources side, but I can see that Sally's got her hand up again. I'm wondering, maybe we could just invite Cornelius and Avril just to say a couple of words on the different resources, because there are a few messages on that asking about what is available and so on. So, Sally, if you don't mind, if we just ask about the resources first, and then we'll come back to you, because I think that, I mean, many of us have seen different things being launched and, when that sort of put on the website and so on. But if someone could recap, I'm looking at you, Cornelius, but would you be happy to give us a quick recap? Well, what are the resources that we've already got, and which are those that are also on the way? And I'll also be happy to hear as well from Avril as well. So Cornelius, if that's okay for you, we'll be happy to hear your thoughts.
Yes, without the use of a safety net, I'm about to put my foot in it. Well, I know that CRPR have launched a number of training schemes out there. So if you go to this to the EDI hub, it will give you details of how to sign up for that. The DIN have also been producing over the last few months a series of inclusive communication guides. There's a suite of them. There will be 5 in total, and I'm looking to Avril to help me out regarding that. There's one on allyship. There's one on on language. There's another, which is
inclusive communications.
Thank you.
There was language, communications, allyship, events, and one other that also escapes me.
Well,
I'll look it up while you keep talking.
Yeah, inclusive events will be launched in October. So over the next week, we're currently going through the final edit of that as we speak, and I believe allyship will be the one that'll be out in December.
I think the other one was EDI basics.
Thank you. But all those, again, if you go to the EDI hub, which you can get either directly from the breadcrumbs at the top of the CRPR website, or if you go to the DIN page and there is a resource section that's available there, you can actually go to and download, have a read of the latest of the guides. They're not going to be exhaustive, for all the reasons that everybody else has already said and the points made by Harish, because, it's not simple. As he said before, it was simpler times. You knew where you were. Unfortunately, it's like, now, there's a lot more information out there, and the information changes rapidly, but it is a good starting point. It is something that we never had 6 months ago. It is something that allows you to have a good basic grounding on some of the things that you should be aware of to start conversations, or to provide advice to other people in your communications teams, or to provide advice upwards to your management team regarding being able to say this or not being able to say that, or have an understanding of the power of language or the power of imagery. So I would strongly suggest, and have a read, have a digest. It's worth 5 points CPD wise, so if that's not a carrot alongside the stick, I don't know what is. And as in all things, we will see as they all come out. We will get feedback, and we will do our best to update them as much as we can in the future. But they are living documents, because this is a subject which changes so often and can change quickly. And so let's start this as a good basic start point. Be aware of the guides, have a read, print them up, have them on the side of your desk. And if there's any questions you have regarding them, please feed them back either to CIPHQ or colleagues on the Diversity Inclusion Network. And we do what we can to actually keep them as updated to date as possible, and to basically provide something that is actually useful to you in practical terms.
And the only thing I'd add to Cornelius's mention is Cornelius and I both, when we can, Dias meeting, are trying to engage with local groups where we can help. So Cornelius, I know, spoke at a group meeting recently. Yesterday, I was on a panel for the Channel Islands CIPR group with a range of people talking about all types of diversity. So if we can help you, we will. Like I say, diaries make it a bit challenging sometimes, but if you're organising events for membership that you want to discuss those sorts of things, we don't, again, like Harry says, we don't have all the answers, but happy if you want to have a discussion with it, drive the debate, explore areas like that, we can help you there. And we also run the reverse mentoring scheme as well, and that's for senior leaders in communications to be mentored by in this case BME PR professionals who sort of mid-level in their careers, and that be very good for really to know what you don't know, to ask sensitive questions, and have a partnership where you can explore the area and get guidance on an ongoing basis, talk about the initiatives you're bringing in, but also explore exactly the sensitive things around how do I ask, is it okay to ask questions about prayers, what language should I use, things like that. And we've had some really good feedback on people who've been on that program as well.
Regarding your comms and surveys that some of you have mentioned also in the chat, I think my best advice would be speak to as many of your stakeholders as you can up front to get your language as accurate as you can. And then when you communicate, whether it's a survey or an email or whatever else it is, admit that you don't have all the answers. You've made your best effort. You've engaged with stakeholders to produce the document, but you welcome all input about how it can be improved or changed to be more accurate. I think that will take you a long way in terms of engaging with your stakeholders to demonstrate your sincerity and commitment, which is what they're really looking for.
Yeah, can I just I'm here to listen, not to talk, but just to throw in one extra thing, Harish, if you don't mind. Just an example of how things quickly change. We've gone from talking about non-white groups to BME groups, to BAME groups, to people of colour, to BIPOC, which is Black and Indigenous people of colour. These things change so regularly, it's very hard to keep up with them. But the main thing is, don't allow not knowing what the current lingua franca is to stop you from doing things that you think and need to be done. I think I put it in this, in the chat about don't chase perfection. What we need is progress. So you're not going to be able to tick every single box when it comes to EDI and then say, oh, now I can begin the journey. Sometimes you need to start the journey to understand what you don't know and do things from that perspective. And that way it actually help everybody if everybody starts moving forward at whatever pace you can, rather than everybody, making sure they've got everything in their toolkit. Because sometimes these toolkits will be exhaustive and you won't be able to have everything. But you do need to take that initial step and keep going on your journey.
I think that's sage advice, Cornelius. Thank you. Yeah, and that language, while it changes, not everyone agrees with it all the time either. I'll add that. So, some groups will be happy with a particular phrase, and other groups will vehemently not be at any day given point in time. So that's another complication that we all have to deal with.
Okay,
shall we go to Sally?
Yep.
Thank you. It's been really valuable actually just listening in before I spoke, because it is aligned with what Rachel was saying. However, I just wanted to, because we've now, and I've been writing a lot of notes about the resources, but I did the EDI series 1 this morning. I had some opportunity to do some time, so I thought, right, go for it. And I was really pleasantly surprised with how the format was. I found it really easy to use, easy to understand. But coming to Rachel's point, I did find loads of support with regards to language, particularly for me around disability language. And it gave me confidence then, thinking I've been on the right tracks, but there's a couple of things where I've realized I've been alternating between certain terms. And so I just wanted to really advocate the fact that it's a really good course to go on. It's not as cumbersome as courses can be. And just to celebrate and congratulate the CIPR for doing it, because it is, I don't know who did it, so that's why I'm just saying it out there now, but I was really impressed. I thought it was brilliant and it was really helpful. So I feel much better informed. And as I say, for Rachel's point, I think if you have a look at it, if you get a chance, it's a really good way of kind of, what's the word, unpicking some of those issues around terms and names.
Great, thank you, Sally. There was one point I was going to add in terms of our experience on the CIPR International Committee, where I have my colleague Tarzima also here with us. So we had our AGM about 2 weeks ago, I think it was, Tarzima, and we decided from ourselves, we are probably one of the most diverse, at least in a sort of linguistic, sort of religious and all the rest of it perspective. So so we decided we wanted to set an example ourselves by actually at the AGM giving someone the title of being the EDI champion. So I'm delighted to say that Tarzima now will be taking over the role next year, both as vice chair and the EDI champion. And so, we've had some discussions within the EDIC committee as well about, if in order for it to be taken seriously on a long-term basis, should all groups actually appoint someone? I mean, should it be made, sort of compulsory that at an AGM you must appoint somebody as your EDI champion? Is it something that should be considered as an example of best practice? I mean, this is an entirely open discussion which none of us have had before. So there's obviously no particular answer here. But from our own perspective, we thought that our own AGM, like recently, was a good chance to be able to sort of, kind of put a marker down to say international, we believe in this, we intend to keep it. And also in terms of our meeting agenda, that we'll also be putting an EDI update in each and every of our agendas going forward. So because I do realise that, for some people, maybe you've got EDI topics to particularly discuss, for others you haven't. So there's still going to be a case of a sort of, what works for your particular committee. But certainly in ours, we felt that we wanted to make an example, and we want to make sure that it's something that we continue. Tarzima will be looking at all of our different activities through the particular lens of EDI. I don't know whether anyone actually has any thoughts on that immediately, or whether they think it should be something that we should all be doing. So I realise some AGMs have taken place, some haven't. So it could also be a timely point to discuss that. Any thoughts on that? Welcome.
I'll say we're doing the same.
Go on, Sally.
I was just going to say, I'm sorry for the thing, but it's just, if no one else, I'll just literally write it in. But yeah, we're doing the same. We've got ours on the 18th, and we're really proud because before we knew, I must add, but we have got Advita Patel, who's our post AGM event speaker as well. So and so we were very clear about being able to incorporate the EDI strategy, and obviously our commitment as a regional committee to share with our members. And we also obviously with having Advita on the sort of in conversation fireside chat kind of thing, ours is virtual, is that was also lending itself nicely. And of course, once she's now been elected as president-elect, it was really good because we felt like that was an extra cue to our setup, really. So yeah, we've done the same. And equally on our committee meeting agendas, we do have an EDI slot always now. So we're very much committed to that, and we think it's a really good idea. It keeps us focused.
Well, exactly. Well, that was also how we saw it, because I think otherwise, there's always events and other activities, and it can easily slide. But if we actually institute it, then we hope that that others will do the same. So thank you, Sally, for the comment. Harish?
I'd maybe just add that what's an absolute minimum is EDI championing. And the rest is then about how you go about achieving that championing. In many ways, it's ideal to have an EDI champion, but there may be practical reasons why that's not immediately possible. But what I mean by championing is there's nothing stopping groups from having EDI on the agenda every meeting, taking a perspective on how events are run, how the group members feel about inclusion at meetings. All those sorts of things can be discussed without a formal champion in place. I think what a champion does is it helps to quite significantly facilitate all of that and create a focus.
Indeed. Thank you, Harish. Ruth, would you like to make a comment?
Thank you. Yes, it was just to first of all, just to second what you've just said, and also just to share, I think I did mention it before. So in East Anglia, we're trying to move forwards on this. So Joe, you're on our call today. It's great you're here. Joe's hoping to be nominated in as one of our EDI champions going forwards. And in fact, one of our nominated co-chairs is also going to be sharing that. So yeah, really second that. And I love the idea of actually making it a regular slot on the committee meeting agenda. I think that's something that we'll probably want to adopt as well. And we've actually got an EDI event next month online, as indeed our AGM is today, which does have its advantages for accessibility, doesn't it? So yeah, we're sort of making strides, but I think that's why there's two of us on the call. I think at least two. I haven't checked anyone else on my phone today, but yeah, we're committed. Also, I did have a question. I just wanted to circle back. So the point was made, the very good point was made, that not only do we need to think about diversity and the nuances of that, and there's been quite a lot of helpful conversation about that it can be quite nuanced, and it's not always like super obvious, to the visible eye. So that's one point. And then the second point was communicating it. So I guess my question is around the communicating it bit. So especially given that as you get into the detail of it, that it can be nuanced. You can look at committee and superficially it can look like it's not very diverse, but if you step into it, there might well be quite a lot of diversity represented. And so I guess I'm thinking, well, the challenge is to communicate it, but how do you do that well? How do you do that without sounding superficial, without inviting criticism? Because like, oh, well, you've said you're diverse in categories, but what about these categories? I'm just trying to think through the practical challenges, and just wondered what advice there might be for navigating that.
So on the second point, I think part of the trick is to, over time, embed it into your culture as a group. And what I mean by that is, for example, we talked about putting it on the agenda every meeting, on the emails, keeping EDI constantly back of mind, because EDI is not some sort of bolt-on bit of engineering kit. It's about culture. It's about how you operate, how you think individually and as teams, and therefore it should belong in every consideration, in effect. But you need to get to the point of unconscious competence, if you like, if you think about the Johari window and the unconscious incompetence through to unconscious competence. So that's where you're trying to get to, is unconscious competence with EDI. And when you get that to there, what will happen is it will naturally flow out of your pores in your communications and things. In the meantime, you've got to experiment at how do you weave it into your conversations, your emails, your events, in ways that hopefully feel natural, feel normal, and also take into account that it won't necessarily satisfy all stakeholders. So I've mentioned before, you've got to prioritize, yes, but you've also got to take all stakeholders with you. So you've got to engage with those stakeholders, all of those stakeholders from the outset. That will mean needing to have difficult conversations at times as well about why certain things can't be prioritized. But I'm afraid there's no real solution to that. But the best thing you can do is to engage with all of your stakeholders from the outset, and encourage that input from them about what their issues are, what their needs are, so you can get the best data possible to make your decisions, and explain to them that that is your process. And was there a prior question, Ruth, that I missed?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, that's really super helpful. Really, really helpful. And I think as well, like, again, just picking up something you said before, what I'm also getting from you is, and from others actually, is that there can be fear. Like, I'm so worried I'm going to get this wrong. You end up doing nothing, and that's not an option. That's not a solution. And so the way forwards is as is always the case with excellent comms, right? Just full and frank communication, being very transparent, being very humble. I love that idea of really, like, just working on embedding it into your culture, and then just being clear, just being transparent, and just saying, like, always making it easy for people to feedback and go, actually, what about this? What about that? And being defenseless about that. So that's really, really helpful. Thank you. Your
mindset should be like my mindset, which is I will make a mistake at some point. And I say that I've spent 22 years thinking about diversity, but I know I will make mistakes. We haven't got time, Nick, to get into why, but it's about unconscious biases, rapid processing, pressures, stresses. So my mindset, which should be the same as your mindset should be the same, is when I make a mistake, if it's a genuine mistake, I'll apologize, and I'll try and have a mature conversation about how it happened and how I can stop it in future. It might be a difference of opinion, both of which are legit, in which case I'll try and have a mature conversation about that. What I won't do is try and hide it or pretend it didn't happen, because that just makes things worse.
100%.
Time, so I'll stop.
That's so helpful. Thank you.
I'll be guided by Samantha at this point, given the timing.
Well, I was just going to say, Harish, we've got 5 minutes left. We've got Tarzima, Kirsty, and Cornelius all with their hands up. So what I would propose, just so we don't run too over time for the next session, if we take Tarzima, Kirsty, one after the other, and then Harish can wind up, and then we'll all have a little break before we come back again for our next session. So Tarzima, happy to hand over to you.
Thank you so much. I think firstly, just to say, so many amazing insights here. Thank you, everyone. But there were 2 things that sort of struck me from Harish, what you said about the culture component. And I wonder if there's almost like a basic level, cursory level intro EDI that we actually put within all our committees. So just like a basic, everyone's almost inducted within. And that's in addition to, I know we've got sort of the on-demand courses and stuff, but that might just give us all a basic starting point as well. The second one was actually just to say, from the work that's already been done by everyone here, we had a new committee member join the international committee, and she's from the Kingdom of Bahrain. And she literally popped a note to me yesterday just to say she thinks she might well be the first Muslim Arab woman from her region. And she's shocked at how easy it was to enter the community. And she was just saying she absolutely loves how inclusive it feels. So I think there's so much being done right here that we almost have to pause to recognize and celebrate strides are being made.
Indeed. Well, thank you, Tarzima, for sharing that with everyone. It's indeed a great point. Kirsty, let's hear from you.
Hello, lovely to see everyone. I'm Kirsty. I'm based in Scotland, but I'm the EDI champion on Public Affairs Committee. But great to see Claire and others here, sort of kind of near neighbours. My question is really just a thought, and I'm really happy to pick this up in further in some of our further meetings. It's actually about growing the pool of volunteers, which clearly we're not. Part of the challenge of this is also our diversity as an industry and as a trade sort of body. So we've got to expand the pool of volunteers that we're all sort of trying to, before we can recruit into our committees, they've got to be members of the CIPR. And I think I could really do with, I think it'd be just really useful to think about what is the pitch that people make to their team leader, to their boss, to support. You know, what is the thing that will help us sort of unlock sort of volunteers? But how do we, you know, if you're a carer, if you're a young person, if you have, you know, if you're going to be part of adding diversity to our happy happy band of CIPR members, you may already be in tokenism, maybe strongly at work in all sorts of groups and workplaces sort of for you. So you may be getting tapped on the shoulder in all sorts of different ways, because we're not the only organisations sort of championing and occasionally struggling sort of with this as well. So what's the pull to CIPR? And obviously the EDI strategy sort of really helps, but also you can have all the sort of diversity kind of characteristics, but you still just want to succeed at work. So, how do we, and also probably crucially, is how do you make the time to be a CIPR volunteer and still do all the things you want to do in your career? So how can we enable, but particularly with an EDI sort of spin, how can we kind of create those materials, that conversation, those events that says, here's how you do it, and here's how you get CIPR membership and benefits into your appraisal conversations. This is what it can do. This is what it can do for you, because we're trying to make an ask of people to join our volunteers. There has to be what's the benefit, what's in it sort of for those individuals. And I think we've got to be perhaps much more specific about the benefits back.
Indeed, thank you, Kirsty. And in fact, Maha's just put on a very helpful reminder on the chat, just to say that all groups are eligible to co-opt non-members to the committee if they think they can add value. So I think that is a timely reminder for everyone. So thank you, Kirsty. Cornelius, we'll just hand over to you before coming back to Harish, and I think we'll probably have to wind up then. I'm looking at Hayley, just so we don't get too much out of kilter for our next session. So Cornelius, over to you.
Can't hear you, Cornelius.
Cornelius, I think you're on mute.
Hello there.
There you are.
I was just saying that back when the DIN was a diversity working group, roughly about 2011, I spoke to the chairs of the time about the need for D&I within the CIPR. And the basic response was, well, in my part of the world, we don't have a diversity problem. So I don't really know why I'm here at this meeting. There was a real non-commitment from people at that time who thought that diversity was literally a race thing, and they didn't even really think of it in any more terms than that. Didn't think about age, disability, gender. It was, my area doesn't have many black people, many brown people, whatever. Therefore, I don't have a diversity issue. So it's really great to hear moving forward to over the last few years that we have become a much more sensitive, much more aware group of professionals looking at D&I. And it's great to hear so many people who are concerned about the makeup of their groups, etc., who are concerned regarding whether or not they are have enough representation within their groups. Big thing about regarding that is you are now aware of these possible pitfalls. You are now working towards dealing with these possible pitfalls. The very fact that you're actually in on this call means you are doing your best to actually move things forward. We as a body have moved a lot in the last 10 years or so. So don't be concerned about making mistakes. As Sherry said earlier, we are going to make mistakes. I know, I've made mistakes, the group has made mistakes. We've also had successes. Let's build upon and embrace those and say, we are at a better time than we were a few years ago. There are some great things coming down the pipeline. We have more people who are interested in diversity, both from a personal and a professional perspective. And there's a lot we can do, and we are doing at this moment in time. So for those people who 10 years ago said there's no diversity problem within the CIPR, well, there is a diversity problem, but we are, in PR, in society generally, but we are looking at regarding what can we do to actually make things a much more inclusive place, and shifting the dial from diversity and inclusion and equity to what we hope it will be. And as people said before earlier, that sense of just belonging.
Thank you, Cornelius. And Avril's also got a hand up.
I promise it's only a quick thing, but just to point out the change. I know this is ethnicity based, but in July the Pro Awards held their Pro Awards for BME talent, BME campaigns judged by BME people, and there was a room of a couple of hundred PR UK professionals from a BME background, and that room would not have been possible 15 years ago or so. And so change is happening, and change on various different types of diversity. But it was just so nice to be in that room and think, actually, we are making a difference, and the CIPR is making a difference as well as part of that.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Avril. So, Harish, well, briefly, as we'll soon be moving on, but if you can just sum up all of that in a moment, any additional thoughts, Harish?
I'm delighted by the questions and the comments you've all posed, and it augurs well, I think, for somebody just commented on energy in this group, and I think that's what this is about. It's, yeah, you are creating this energy for yourselves, and as a group, there's the WhatsApp group that I'm aware of. There are other things that you can use to interact. Leverage that energy as best you can. I'm a big believer in sharing good ideas, best practice. You will have good ideas among yourselves, best practice ideas, share those with each other, reach out to each other. I think this is the start of an amazing journey, actually, that the CIPR can to some degree only facilitate. Yeah, we all own EDI, so we've all got to play our part. But from everything I've heard today, this certainly energizes me in terms of what can be achieved in the groups.
Indeed. Well, thank you, Harish, and thanks for everyone for all of their comments, and also all the comments in the chats where we've also had a lively debate there. So I'll hand back over to you, Hayley.
Thank you. I was just going to say a massive thank you to Harish and Samantha, but also thank you to everybody, because I feel like there was such a huge amount of participation. You all deserve massive thanks for sharing your thoughts and being honest. There's so many points in there that we are going to follow up on. So just to remind everybody that we have recorded the call. So following this, we'll send an email round with a link to the recording. I'll try and pick out some of the resources that people have mentioned as well and pop those into the email just for ease for you. And also you get 5 CPD points for attending today as well. So we'll talk to you about how you do that, because we really appreciate the time that you've taken to do this as well. But that's it really, just massive thanks to everybody. And as most of you know, we've got a group chairs call, which was supposed to start 5 minutes ago. So I'm going to end the call quite quickly and start that one. For everybody that isn't coming to that call, thank you again. And hopefully we'll see you all again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.